definitely unique.
What am I watching?
What a unique map, man.
What is this map?
Alright, okay, here we go. Behold, everybody, the pyramid.
Hello, welcome. My name is Nolafis, and today we're doing something a bit different. Wirtual made a track of the day map, which means we have another controversy. Except this time, it's about the map itself. Given Trackmania map analysis is pretty much my thing here, I thought I'd give reviewing the map a try and seeing what lessons we can learn from it. The map ended up being one of the most downvoted maps of all time. Wirtual says that a lot of those votes are coming from just the players that have the strongest feelings, as well as a few haters, but says the map itself is pretty good. I would like to take a look myself and see how accurate of an assessment I think that is. If only the people who felt the strongest about the map voted, why was it super negative? And while I don't doubt for a second that more than a few people voted triple minus simply because they don't like Wirtual, to get this strong of a reaction, something else has to have gone wrong. That being said, not all of the comments have been negative. Several players have stated they really enjoyed the map and don't understand why the discourse has been so negative. Opinions differ a lot on this one, and it seems like we have a lot to look at, so let's get started. Yes, this video is going to be about Pyramidori, but that's not the whole story. Wirtual has made a couple of previous track of the days, and I think we can better understand today's topic by going back, specifically to Wirtual's other controversial map and Pyramidori's predecessor, Midori. Midori was unveiled as track of the day on July 23rd, 2022, and it quite literally changed the game forever. This was the map that got custom action keys banned and prompted Nadeo to change ice and water physics. For the comprehensive story on what happened, Wirtual himself made a video about it, which I will link in the description below, but I'm not here to talk about the biggest controversy. I'm here to take a look at some of the other criticisms this map received. Midori is a full-speed bobsled map that was also known for being very difficult. Full speed and bobsled separately are both styles that are unforgiving, especially to newer players. Put them together and the line to the finish becomes very narrow. Bobsled requires entering these elements in a very specific spot, while full speed demands steering perfection at very high speeds, where one wrong tap will send you off course. Combine them and you get a map where one wrong tap will not only lose you speed, but also guarantee a bad setup into the bobsled where your car can go spinning out of control, which is a nasty duo to send in for track of the day. If you don't know what that is, Nadeo basically features a map for 24 hours. There's a daily tournament called Cup of the Day that happens, and once the day is up, the in-game leaderboards are frozen. It's normally a requirement that maps selected are doable by all drivers, but Midori was way more difficult than other maps. Several people weren't able to finish at all, and while the map was more remembered for the action key controversy, I think Wirtual also kept in mind the problems due to difficulty when thinking of building a new map. But if the combination was so difficult, why did Wirtual build it in the first place? Well, if you look past the meme videos and challenges, Wirtual is very good at full speed, and before the update, he was also one of the best bobsled players in the world. Mashing the two together wasn't really done before on this big of a stage, and it just so happened that combining the two turned out to be, we'll say, not the friendliest to newer players. You know, the type of people that would watch Wirtual and then buy the full version of Trackmania just to play his map for Cup of the Day, only to load in and not be able to qualify. Players weren't happy. But that was one time on a map with a style mashup that wasn't really done before as track of the day. Now that he's had a chance to see what the combo was like and learn from his past mistakes, I was very curious to see what Pyramidori was going to be like. It had been over 2 years since Midori, and Pyramidori was about to be unveiled. No one really knew what the map was going to be like. Would Wirtual stick with bobsled full speed or go in a completely different direction? He was still really good at full speed, but due to the physics changes from Midori, bobsled was no longer one of Virtual's favorite styles. There was a lot of speculation leading up to the reveal, but I don't think any of us were expecting something like this. With most Trackmania maps, you'll be able to see the route at the first overview. Not every detail, but you can normally tell what style it is and see a few elements you should prepare for. This time, I don't think anyone knew what to think. We saw a pyramid, some red lines, and not much else. The map was probably inside of the pyramid, but if that was the case, why were there these odd structures on the outside? Before too long, it was time to start driving, and people quickly figured out that this was it. The route was about going up and down each side of the pyramid, with a little bit of bobsled in the start and some full speed elements. But for the most part, this map is very difficult to classify. I'm not saying that as a criticism, by the way. Tons of great maps have broken the rules of sticking to a style, but there is something to be said about the aura of mystery this map had surrounding it, only to open the map for the first time and have even more questions than when you started. Right away, the community was starting to be divided. It seemed Virtual wasn't too interested in following conventional mapping trends, and this is what he made. I should mention that the scenery was done by Akla. The scenery was done by Akla. I'm not sure what the collab was like and how much of a say Akla got, but I'll be keeping all of my comments directed at Virtual, since this is his map, and I bet most of the decisions were made by him. Just wanted to make that clear. After the initial dust had settled and people had driven Cup of the Day, opinions were still divided. Some people loved how unique the map was, while others said it was boring and bland. I won't be counting this against the map very much, but I should also mention that there was a cut. A decent one that saves about half a second, and isn't too difficult to pull off. As someone who has had 2 of their own Track of the Day maps cut, I don't think it would be very fair of me to criticize it that heavily. Sometimes, you just miss it. There was a hunting competition where the first 3 people who got the AT won prizes, with the later update that there would be separate prizes with and without the cut. There is one more thing though. There's no official rating system for Track of the Day maps, but there is a Discord bot that's on several different Trackmania Discord servers where players can vote. The options range from triple minus to triple plus, and by the end of the day, Pyramidori ended up with 330 triple minus votes. For context, I don't think that breaks the record, but it's definitely in the top 3. So, why? Why was this map so hated, and was it actually that hated? Should Virtual consider this map a failure and try to learn from it, or was the score so low because of haters? Well, let's take a look. I'm going to start by talking about the route, and it's weird, to say the least. But that doesn't mean it's bad. In my opinion, a map is only a failure if it doesn't live up to what its purpose is supposed to be. So Virtual's maps he quickly builds on stream to laugh at his viewers trying to win are successful, while Midori's initial difficulty would make it questionable at best for a Cup of the Day. But given the high skill ceiling and low RNG, it turns out to be a very solid hunting map. With that criteria, let's see how Pyramidori stacks up. Just like its predecessor, this is a fast map, and that's where the similarities end. I mean, there's a bit of bobsled, but it's only at the beginning. Once you're done with that, it's time for a couple high-speed turns that you don't want to slide for, into a speed slide up the pyramid. You have to be careful as you transition from one side of the pyramid to the other, collect the checkpoint, and once again transition to the other side. A couple of plastic wall hugs later, and it's time for the loop. I hope you exited on the right side because you want to turn immediately for a speed slide to the finish. That's the route, and it's definitely a wild ride. As a Cup of the Day map, I think the biggest improvement over Midori was the difficulty. Virtual brought it up almost immediately on stream that everyone was able to finish, and I think he hit that goal spot on. Not only that, but there are plenty of places for good players to gain time over everyone else. It's not that fun when a few tenths separate the top divisions from the middle of the pack, and the leaderboards were full of players with all sorts of times. It's also important to make sure that all of the elements are calculated, meaning that if a player takes the optimal line through one turn, they're in a good position to take the next one, so people aren't punished for driving well. In this regard, I also think the map is strong. There's a lot of room to explore, which means there's plenty of room to properly set things up, and the speed slides feel well built as they put you right where you need to be. That being said, the map does have a few problems. And I'm sorry, Virtual, if you're watching this, but it's time to rip into the route like wrapping paper on Christmas. Oh, sorry, I mean, constructively criticize for the sake of education. There you go, much better. I think my biggest problem with the route are the actual elements and how they balance with each other. They're built well, but they are not created equally. Virtual said himself.
Yeah.
Guys, the bobsleigh is the easiest part. There's no tricks. If you're losing time, it's not in the bobsleigh, I promise.
There's not a lot of time to gain in the bobsled, and given the element afterwards is just a normal turn, you don't really have to start fighting for time loss until after the first 20 seconds of the map is already over. That's almost half the map, and even when you do start driving through actual elements, the first one that will significantly impact your run is the first plastic wall hug at around 30 seconds. And I'm gonna explain why that is for a moment. Given it's one of his favorite styles, I think it makes sense for Virtual to build some full speed elements in his map. But that's not the only style in this route, and there's a very good reason full speed doesn't make it into mixed style maps. The whole point of full speed is that the car doesn't slow down, which means when the car is mixed with anything, whatever does make the car slow down automatically becomes the most important part of the map, as the speed gain or loss will be carried for however long the next full speed section is. In the case of Pyramidori, you have full speed after the first 20 seconds, a slight break with the plastic wall hugs, and back to full speed until the finish, meaning any mistake in those wall hugs will get amplified with no hope of catching back up, which sucks for a live competition environment where a lot of excitement comes with the push and pull of maybe falling behind at first, but digging deep and risking to catch back up by the finish line. Here, if you make one mistake, it's all over, which is a lot easier to do than I think Virtual anticipated. Now, I'm going to talk about how open the map is and how it's a common mistake I see when builders want to make an easier route. It can work in some cases, but it can also have the opposite effect, where the intended line that once was obvious with the narrow passageways now becomes lost in the sea of platform. The beginning of the map actually pulls this off quite well, as there are plenty of lines that work without immediately giving away Virtual's secret best line. The second half of the map, however, is where it stops working. The route is still wide open, but the entry to the wall hugs are so narrow players can easily fly out without any warning. And even though there isn't any real RNG in Trackmania, this is about as close as we can get. And you can watch any Cup of the Day playthrough to see players complaining that they got eliminated because of the wall hugs. So despite the map being open, that actually made lining up for the plastic harder, as very few lines actually worked, but that wasn't obvious until it was too late. Another element that suffered due to the openness was the loop, specifically the exit of the loop. Once you exited that final element, it was a race down the pyramid directly to the finish. With nothing else corralling players, it was very easy to accidentally go too wide and lose over a full second. If you wanted the best ending, you were going to have to prepare before the exit was visible, making the last turn blind. And if you managed to survive the plastic wall hugs, you now had to get through one more RNG element in the form of a guessing game. Basically, the entire 45-second route comes down to 3 inconsistent elements. If I were to suggest any fixes that could be made, I'd start by looking at the main theme of the route. Given the fact that full speed is so difficult to mix with other styles, I would mainly want to have the route focus on that and get rid of the plastic wall hug section along with the bobsled start. I know Virtual included the beginning as a nod to Midori, but the idea I'm trying to get across is that the map should be much more balanced. At least that's what I'm thinking while keeping track of the day in mind, or more specifically a quick learning environment like Cup of the Day. Once we get out of that restraint, the things I called RNG can mostly be alleviated by spending a lot of time on the map. Every time someone tries a run on Pyramidori, they're getting a better feel for what works and doesn't work. When Wirtual unveiled this map to the public, Track of the Day wasn't the only goal. After all, we can't forget about the hunting competition, where a lot of players would be spending enough time on the map to hopefully negate the RNG elements, by figuring out exactly where to set up for the wall hugs and how to exit the loop properly. Even when ignoring those, however, I still think the unbalanced nature of the map reduces the hunting potential greatly. The problems with the start not mattering don't go away, and technically, when going for a world record, you should want everything to be perfect, but the first solid element to gain or lose you time is still going to be at 30 seconds. Essentially making it so there's a loading screen for the first half of the map to see if you actually get a shot at world record. So despite being much easier than Midori, I think the route misses the mark for being a good Track of the Day map due to the RNG elements. Once you start hunting for an extended period of time, however, some of the problems do go away. As I said, the elements are well calculated and there's plenty of time to be gained over other players. I just wish the first half of the map mattered as much as the second. All in all, not the best route ever made, but definitely far from the worst. And hopefully, some things to keep in mind for next time. No matter how many players say that scenery doesn't matter for a route, it's still an important part of the map. Scenery can help guide the player to the correct line and prevent cuts in addition to making a track stand out. When I was going through the discussions about Pyramidori, people kept bringing up the scenery and how lackluster it was. For the record, I do think that Okla did a fantastic job. The textures and map overall look nice, and I'm not sure what restrictions were in place, be it file size or something else. I don't know, I've never used Blender. So I'm mainly talking to Wirtual with these criticisms. And with that in mind, the scenery is boring. I'm sorry, I know you were going for realism, but let me explain. The reason the scenery is boring is because it literally falls flat. There are several spots on the map where you're looking at nothing but a wide tan block, with maybe a structure or two out in the distance. In order for a scenery to be more exciting, it has to be built closer to the player. There's a difference between driving on a route and driving in a map, and this feels like the former. Wirtual said he wanted to keep things somewhat accurate to real life and only make necessary changes to make the route work. I respect the added restriction, as I'm a big fan of adding these little rules on my own projects, but I do feel like there's a lot of missed potential. There are several ways to keep that goal and also make the map more visually appealing. Ancient Egypt was a very colorful culture with a rich mythology to pull from. Instead of a red line in the sky, maybe some stylized signs being held up by flying scarab beetles, or colorful banners showing off the vast array of dyes they had access to. Given that the pyramid itself is colored, the statues should also be in their original colors. There were a few accent colors here and there, but I think so much more could have been added. And I can't help but feel there was a lot of missed opportunity on the scenery side. As I said before, I don't know how much of this is possible given that I've never worked in Blender, but I think people are justified in thinking that the map looks bland or incomplete. What we have is good, I just wish there was more of it. Overall, I think the sentiment I feel is that Pyramidori is a map with weak ideas that was executed very well, which is an interesting spot to be in. Wirtual doesn't build a lot of maps for Track of the Day, so I feel like a lot of the mistakes were ones that were made out of a lack of experience. But since he's such a good player, he's able to tweak them until they work. With the lessons learned with this map, I'm very confident that his future projects will be much more successful. Given the issues I outlined earlier, I would say that Pyramidori misses the mark on being a good Track of the Day map. Far from being one of the worst, mind you, but the wide open lines made learning the map in a fast setting very difficult, and the RNG elements weren't able to be mitigated in time for the live rounds of Cup of the Day, meaning quite a few people were eliminated solely due to unlucky plastic bounces and losing the guessing game at the end of the loop. Once you do put in that time, though, I think most of the luck factors can be eliminated, and the map can be a decent one to hunt. But the fact that everything relies on the second half of the route leaves a lot to be desired. With all this in mind, I think the community score makes a lot more sense. Most people don't hunt a single map for hours, trying their hardest to make it as high on the leaderboards as possible. So most people tried it for a bit, saw the problems, and didn't hunt for long enough to mitigate those issues. For those that did, most of the inconsistencies went away and the map turned out pretty good. Taking a look at the scores again, we see the average is negative 1.9. Not a good average, but that's barely in the bottom 5 of 2024 so far. And not even close to the worst rated of all time list. Do I think the map deserves all those triple minus votes? No. While I do think most of those votes are justified from legitimately frustrated players, there's no doubt in my mind a decent chunk of those are also from haters who saw the negativity and dogpiled on. Typically, all those bottom votes would make for a super low average, but we also see quite a few triple plus votes as well, with a good spread all over, meaning there's still quite a few players who ended up really enjoying the map. And while I think the map missed its mark a bit, Wirtual says he's happy with how it came out. From one mapper to another, I think you should be happy. Track of the Day has quite a few complaints lately about a lot of the maps feeling the same, and this really got people invested. Even if players weren't a fan overall, I had a blast following everything that happened. So, thank you for the entertainment. And if you ever want more of my feedback for your next track, feel free to submit your map for one of my map review sessions. And hold your head up high. The worst thing a map can be is boring, and you definitely made something that was anything but. With that, I think I've said all I wanted to say. I wanted to provide a fair critique while remaining respectful to Wirtual, and hopefully I accomplished my goal here. It's not easy having a large audience and still building a more serious map where everyone can rip it apart. So the fact that Wirtual said he's not done and will build more was nice to hear. But now I'm curious, what did you think of the map? Did you like Pyramidori? Did you hate it? Did this video change your mind on something? Or did I miss something? Let me know in the comments below. If you are looking for feedback on your own maps, I'd recommend joining my Discord and submitting your map for my weekly map review stream. You can send in your map on Tuesday, 1 hour before the cup, where we take a look on Wednesday. Your local times may vary. If you're interested in general Trackmania mapping content, you're in the right place, as that's pretty much what I do. And I'd appreciate a like on the video and subscribing. I think that's all the self-advertising out of the way, and I would just like to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch my video. I really do appreciate it. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to make a prediction for Wirtual's next map, which will be a tech map themed to the construction of a pyramid called Internal Ramp Pyramidori. Bye!